This is Just Something About Her, a podcast from the Recount and iHeartRadio. So we're talking to Representative Gina Hinojosa and Mary González. You said your father's a Republican. You know, is it sort of like sense of bipartisanship or like coming together in terms of something good for Texas? Do you feel like that's gone, or that's still possible, or how has it changed?
It's a recent history of working with Republicans. Before, when I was a college activist, I would chain myself to buildings. But I do think my desire to work with everybody, and it's not that I want to work with Republicans. I literally want to work with everybody, stems from two places. One, of course, my dad, who is politically, ideologically different from me. And it's so funny because you have Gina on the call, who her dad is like this mega superstar Democrat. And like, how cool is that? But the second part of it is I'm an educator. So think about when I had students who were different than me. I always had to work with all my students to get to a place of a level of understanding. I'm always say I'm very grateful that I was a professor before I was an elected official, because I take the same tools of trying to plant seeds and create greater consciousness that I did it when I was a professor. Ultimately, as I mentioned before, democracy is very fragile in this moment in time. And if one of my favorite books, and if you haven't read it, add it to your book list, How Democracies Die, talks about the strength of needing a healthy political party system. And right now, I want to make sure that we have healthy political parties who are functioning, and I feel I play a role in that. So
I want to ask both of you that when I'm watching like the cable networks and seeing the headlines, it feels like it's mostly what I have been seeing is a lot of women, Texas women from the House Democratic Caucus speaking up, and that I've met some men, some of your male colleagues here too, but it does feel like a movement that's powered by a lot of women. Is that true? And can you both tell us about some of these women?
I think this session we had more women in the Democratic caucus than we've ever had. Last session, when we flipped 12 seats, most of those were women, and I believe we picked up more Democratic women than Republican men that year. So women are a growing, strong force in the Texas House. Democratic women, there are only a few Republican women in the House. Again, we have almost half the caucus, and the women do the work, and also when we broke quorum, it was the women who went first, and the women were kind of held up when we broke quorum the first time. They left the floor first. They got on their phones, started pinging all their friends on the floor saying, get your butt off the floor, come join us. And they had those relationships to be able to move other members. So, again, the women do the work, and we're just a strong and growing force in the Texas House. I would like to hear Mary's perspective, because she's been in the House much longer than I have.
I completely agree with Gina. There are more Democratic women. It's been a transition over time. And what I love not only is that there's women with a variety of backgrounds, so a lot of intersectionality. You see a lot of queer women. You see, not a lot, but 6, which was more than one. The one when I came in, you see a lot of women of color, Black women, brown women. So I think it is a very exciting moment to start to see the diversity that exists in Texas. And one of my favorite quotes, that if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And so now that we are finally getting to be at the table more, we are leading movements. We are front and center. And what I think is critical is, how do we institutionalize that in a way that makes us a healthy caucus and a healthy state? And I think that is something we are still working towards. But I'm really grateful that I'm in community with some great women who are leading that conversation.
So this is interesting, though, because Representative Hinojosa said that specifically that, the first time you all did the walkout, that it was women that sort of made the decision or got fed up first. Do you think that, for both of you, do you think that is, are the women more willing to take risk, more tuned into abuse of power, felt like you as a woman had more on the line, particularly because of a lot of what they're going after, what the Republicans are going after were, abortion rights, things like that, things where women had a lot at stake?
There are two things that come to mind. One is, my experience has been that the Democratic women in the House are very concerned about the collective, less about in their individual agenda and more about the collective success, the success of the whole, right? So we make sacrifices to make that happen. Another interesting thing is a lot of these women have recently been elected to office, and a lot of these women have flipped seats. So they didn't get there kind of through the traditional, like, well, I see that I can easily win this. I have the credentials. The numbers are in my favor. And I mean, I've been elected to office before. This was not like the traditional path. These were women who said, you know what? I have no chance in hell of winning this election because this district's been Republican forever. But I'm not going to stand for this anymore, and I'm going to run. So they're renegades.
Building on that, women have had to navigate our world differently especially those of us who love politics. So getting into these positions, we've had to navigate it very differently. When I go talk to students all the time, they ask me, what are you the most proud of? And I always say, two things. One is very practical. I represent 263 colonias. I'm very proud that I have been able to advocate for clean water and basic infrastructure for colonias because, it's just a disgrace that it's 2021 and there's thousands of Texans that don't have access to water and wastewater infrastructure. But the second thing I'm the most proud of is that is the work I and I think other women have done to maintain and be the most authentic versions of themselves in this space. So this session, I'm vice chair of appropriations. It may have taken me 10 years to be there. Like the person before me would easily got to that position, but it took me 10 years because I didn't change who I was. And it might have taken half a decade longer, but at least that's the way I've navigated power. And so I think because
by being your true self.
By being your true self, right? What I love about the women of the House is that they are the most authentic human beings you will ever meet. And it's refreshing in politics because that's what our youngest people need to see. These women will literally, this is their soul. And they're more willing to sacrifice, I think, sometimes, because we've always had to be untraditional. And I don't just think in politics. I see it even in the way Gina is a mother and having to balance all this, or even Aaron Zwiener, or you just see a very different model of leadership, of navigating the world, and I think it's beautiful.
It seems like that you guys are very much in this fight together, and I'm really honored to have the chance to speak with both of you. Good luck. You have a long way to go, but I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks.
It's an honor to talk to you.
Thanks for watching. You can watch the full episode of Just Something About Her on the Recount, streaming daily, or listen to it wherever you get your podcasts.